Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome to your Tuesday edition of the Post Up with David Grubb right here on Boot Crew Media. I, of course, am David Grubb, so we got plenty to talk about today. First, we got some big news as the New Orleans Pelicans have made their first trade of the offseason. Didn't offload any players, but what they did is they secured a second first-round pick in this year's draft. They made a deal with the Indiana Pacers in order to get the number 23 pick in this year's draft, as well as the rights to guard Mojave King as well, in exchange for next year's 2026 first rounder that the Pelicans had from the Pacers as part of the Brandon Ingram deal. Now, what this means is that the Pelicans, like we said, have two cracks at the apple here in the first round of this draft. And I think that the thing is, with this, we don't know if there's going to be more moves. Could the New Orleans Pelicans be using this on two players that they really like in the first round? Absolutely. 23 is not too far back to get another player who you can plug and play into this rotation. You can get somebody that you have a high value on who maybe slips in this draft to the 23rd spot. There's certainly some bigs there who can contribute. There are some perimeter players who could contribute at that spot. So the Pelicans can do that. You can take a player with more potential and take them lower in that first round, whereas you take a more steady pick at that 7 spot. And we'll talk about those in a little while. But also the Pelicans could be packaging these picks as part of their rumors to move up in this draft and get a player that they really like. And we'll talk about that one player in particular in just a moment. But I think what this indicates, again, is that Joe Dumars and Troy Weaver are going to be aggressive as they try to rebuild this team. This is the first move of what I expect will be a number of moves this offseason. Again, I would have to stress that I don't think that there's going to be what I would consider a major overhaul of this roster where you see a number of principal pieces get moved. But the Pelicans certainly want to add in the short term to their core and put some better support pieces around Zion Williamson. If we're talking about Mojave King and what his skill set is, he's out of New Zealand, played in Australia with Dyson Daniels and Josh Giddey as part of the NBL when he was 16 years old, became professional, I believe, in Australia. Got drafted by the Lakers in the second round, the number 47 pick in 2023, played for the G League Ignite team there. His reputation at 6'5" is that he is a knockdown shooter who can also attack off of closeouts and get his own offense. So I think that that's why he's attractive to the Pelicans in this trade, to not only add that second first rounder, but to pick up someone in an area of need. You need depth at the 2 spot. You need shooting, and to get a young player who potentially can help you address that problem with some size at 6'5", I think is a good thing for the New Orleans Pelicans. I don't think it's something that we want to dismiss. As far as his physicals, again, 6'5", 6'8" wingspan, able to block shots at the rim, a pretty decent defensive rebounder, according to scouting reports before he was drafted, able to defend both guards positions and exerts a lot of energy defensively. A potential 3-and-D ball off guard or wing at the NBA level is what he's projected, a solid second rounder. So we'll see. You can check out his highlights. They are available on YouTube. You can see what his YouTube Ignite highlights look like, and what he's done since then. Has not put up the kind of shooting numbers maybe that people would like in the G League so far, but a decent player nonetheless. So we'll see if the Pelicans, at the very least, will bring him to training camp, I would think, and see what he can do, and maybe be a dark horse contributor to this team. All right, well, let's start with another guy. The guy that the rumors have circulated most around the Pelicans as far as a potential move up in this year's draft, and that's Ace Bailey. And it looks like Bailey's value is plummeting, or at least the opinion of him is plummeting. He continues to slide in all of the mock drafts. He has fallen out of the top 5, according to an ESPN mock draft that was released earlier Tuesday morning. If those reports are accurate, if that's the case, then the Pelicans may not have to move up in order to take him. It looks pretty solid that the Spurs have only worked out Dylan Harper, so it looks like that's who they're going to take. We certainly know the Mavericks at number 1 are going to take Cooper Flagg. The question comes in at that 3rd spot. And so if you're the Pelicans and there's not a rush to take Ace Bailey, with the Sixers being more and more linked to guys like VJ Edgecombe and Trey Johnson, if Bailey's the guy you really want, if you're the Pelicans, then you may not have to trade up to get him. Bailey himself is doing his no favors for his NBA career during this pre-draft process. According to Jonathan Givney, Bailey had a rough time in Chicago at his combine. If you've seen the interview, he didn't get a lot of rave reviews for his interview where he was asked about his weaknesses and said, I have no weaknesses and I got way more than 2 strengths. There's some approach, things that teams are concerned about in his approach to the game. They are concerned about his lack of preparation, his lack of focus at times. He was allegedly called a poor teammate while he was at Rutgers. And there are questions, according to scouts, about his feel for the game and lack of overall polish. His ability to put the ball on the court is something that they have questioned. His ability to be a receptive passer and to understand what defenses are doing against him. He is a tough shot maker. That's true, but he puts himself, and this is the scouting report, and I think you can see it in film as well, is that he intentionally at times puts himself in tough positions to make shots. So you have to be a tough shot maker when you are putting yourself in jeopardy. And at the collegiate level, with someone with his skill set, having that type of challenge on a regular basis is unexpected. He is finally conducting his first workout. Prior to today, he had not conducted a single workout and had none scheduled. But as this report of him not working out for teams and reportedly turning down every team in the top 10 outside of the top 2 that asked him to work out, he's turned those down. Him and his team have said, no, we're not working out because they feel that Bailey is a top 3 prospect. Well, finally, he's going to work out for the 76ers later this week. But again, that seems reactionary to all these reports that came out that he was turning down workouts left and right. So his camp has told interested teams that one of the things that Ace Bailey is looking for is a clear pathway to stardom. And to me, that is a concern. If a player says that they're looking for stardom and they want to come into a team, not really compete for their position, they want it to be assured that they're going to get minutes, that they're going to get shots. I think this was the concern that we talked about with Ace Bailey, whether it's been me, whether it's been Chris Connor, whether it's been Lito Henderson. If you're talking about anybody discussing this scenario with Ace Bailey, one of the concerns was that he was going to need the attention of the franchise. And I think that's really hard for the Pelicans to give him the kind of attention that he needs when you have Zion Williamson that you are trying to establish this new relationship with. You have Trey Murphy coming back, who's going to assert himself after this kind of season he had last year. And you have these other veterans on the team that you have not decided their fates, who are going to not necessarily be looking to give up time and minutes to a rookie who has not proven himself. So if you're not willing to give Ace Bailey a position from day one where he's going to get that kind of volume, and going back to yesterday's comments about Willie Green and his planning, it just doesn't seem like a fit to me. But let's go through some more of this with Ace Bailey and just continue to have the kind of players around that are going to frustrate your fan base. If you got a guy who feels like a me first player that wants the shortcut to stardom, I think that's a real problem. And by a number of scouts, if you ask amongst the top 10 prospects who's the most likely bust, there are a lot of people who would rank Ace Bailey first in that group. And it's not because of his athleticism. Yeah, the 6'7" thing is definitely a concern, that he wasn't the listed 6'10", but you put on the shoes, you get a little bit taller. But I think that there's an overall concern that, like, if you are physically smaller than those at your position, which I think he will be, can you perform at that kind of level at the NBA? And I don't know if he can. And I think that there is, with these attitude concerns and these question marks about his willingness to fit into a team culture, when the Pelicans don't already have a strong one, you can't add that kind of player to the mix, in my opinion. I think that that's ultimately would be a disaster for both Ace Bailey and the New Orleans Pelicans. The Pelicans have added a couple more players to their list of players that they've worked out. Con Knippel, second team all ACC selection as a freshman. You know about him, averaging 14 points, 4 rebounds, 2.7 assists last season for Duke, 1 steal, 39 games played. Shot 40.6% from 3-point range, 7th in the country in free throw percentage, and 9th in win shares. So a very productive player, 6'6", can come in, plug and play, knock down shots for you. Again, great ball handler in the pick and roll situations, good decision maker. The other guy, Cedric Coward, who's come in to work out. Coward just played 6 games last season. He was scheduled to transfer to Duke, but decided to stay in the NBA draft. Had a shoulder injury last year, but averaged 17 points, 7 boards, right around 4 assists, just under 2 blocks. And a huge 7'2" wingspan, and his max vertical was listed at 38.5 inches, which was the 9th best out of all participants. So Coward is one of those players that athletically kind of jumps off the screen for you. The other players with first round grades that the Pelicans have invited in to work out: Derek Queen, Igor Demon, Nick Clifford, Asa Newell, and Will Riley. All of those are first round graded players who have worked out for the New Orleans Pelicans. And now when you look at this, some of these guys are ranked in the 20s, your Nick Cliffords, your Asa Newells, your Will Rileys, when you talk about their ranking amongst prospects. The Pelicans now, as we talked about number 23, these are players that they could get later in the first round. So it makes sense. Whereas I think we had some fans who were a little, perturbed, quite frankly, with some of the players that were invited in to work out, saying, well, how are any of these guys worth value? And I think if you're the Pelicans, you always had this approach. It's something that we've discussed this entire offseason, that the Pelicans needed to get back into this draft, whether that meant by acquiring some second round picks or if it meant getting back into the first round. So if you haven't done your due diligence and you're not prepared for that moment, then you've made a mistake. And the Pelicans in this case are clearly prepared for the trade that they've just made. And we'll see if there are secondary moves, as I said earlier. But if this is the move for this draft, if this is what you've secured, at the very least, you've done your homework on the players that'll be available when you get to that 23rd pick. Another name that has kind of been attached to the Pelicans lately by some sources, not a ton, but I kind of understand why this guy would be mentioned for the New Orleans Pelicans, is Collin Murray-Boyles out of South Carolina. And there are reports that the Pelicans are considering him at that 7th pick. Before we get into it, and I know there are folks who are groaning at this, and I understand, I'm not for taking Collin Murray-Boyles, but if that's who they're interested in, and I think that would be a move back candidate. I don't think you're taking him at 7. If somebody else wants to take him at 7, let them do it. But if you're the Pelicans, it feels like a redundant type of player for me. Because, yes, here are the positives when you talk about CMB. You're talking about defensively, that's where he gets his reputation from. Held opponents to sub 40% shooting, really good rim defender, really good defender on jump shots. Had 2.8 stocks per game. That's the combined total of steals and blocks. So he does a good job of creating turnovers as a defender. Very physical on the offensive end. Able to score at a high percentage around the baskets, almost 70% field goal percentage around the rim. Crashes boards, averaging more than 8 rebounds a game. Good on the offensive glass. High IQ basketball player. Can make passes out of the pick and roll. Good energy on both ends of the floor, and is viewed as somebody that fits all the analytics profiles. A defender who can guard multiple positions on the defensive end, so brings you that kind of versatility. But the problems for him are what makes it redundant to me to put him on this Pelicans team. Just a 26% three-point shooter during his time in college, not a very good catch and shoot player, not a great free throw shooter, and is only 6'7". So you already have your undersized 4/3 in Zion Williamson. I don't think you can take on another one. He's also a high turnover guy, not a super athlete. So if you're going to be undersized, you've either got to be extremely physical to be able to score around the rim and have the ability to finish like a Zion Williamson, that undersized player. But if you don't have the athletics, you're not good side to side. He's going to have trouble competing with faster wings, more athletic players. He seems like a guy who's a better fit for a team that doesn't have a small ball 4. Pelicans have their small ball 4. And if they go bigger and you put a Kelly Olynyk on the lineup, and we'll talk about Kelly in just a minute, but if you go bigger and put a Kelly Olynyk up on the lineup, you're not putting this guy at the 3 spot. Because if he's struggling with handling the basketball, if he's struggling with athleticism and quickness, can you afford to have him in that position? And who does he guard? Even if he can guard multiple positions, if he struggles with quickness, can he be the kind of foundational defender that it would take for him to stick at the NBA level? I would have concerns about that. I understand that he would be a Joe Dumars type of player, disciplined, high IQ, physical, defense-oriented. He could play professional basketball. I'm not saying that, but I think his skill set as a rookie to come in and contribute and to have the things that he needs to learn, especially offensively, at number 7 doesn't feel right. Not with the needs that the Pelicans have of height and athleticism, perimeter playmaking, and shooting. However you want to rank those 3, those are the biggest deficits that the Pelicans have. And this guy doesn't address any of them in a way that you need them to. He's not going to improve your shooting. He could improve your defense. He could improve your rebounding. Those things are true. But I think with the skill set of what you already have on this Pelicans team, his defensive skills do not warrant him being the 7th pick by the New Orleans Pelicans. So, like I said, it makes sense. He's a guy that kind of fits the Pelicans' defensive ideals. He kind of fits the Pelicans' player mold as far as what Joe Dumars has stated that he wants. But I don't think he is a floor spacing threat, and I don't think he's a perimeter threat enough at this stage to be the 7th overall pick. All right, finally, today we're going to talk about Kelly Olynyk. Of course, Kelly is entering the final year of his deal this year. 7-footer, averaged 10.7 points, 5 boards for the Pelicans in 20 games after coming over in the Brandon Ingram deal. He's scheduled to make over $13 million next season in the final year of his contract, has averaged 57.5 games played since 2022, 38% 3-point shooter with nearly a 2-to-1 assist to turnover ratio. I think that when you discuss Kelly Olynyk's future, you don't have a problem with the Pelicans keeping Kelly Olynyk. As a basketball player, he's a fine bench piece. He's shown that he can play for winning teams, that he can be a good bench contributor, that he plays decent defense, that he can knock down the outside shot, and that he can pass the ball very well from the high post and the perimeter. He can be a contributor for this team. Absolutely. I think that when you discuss moving Kelly Olynyk, it's because you know he has value. He is going into the final year of his contract. And you may need to attach that kind of attractive contract to a less attractive deal, whether that's the CJ McCollum contract, whether that's the DeJounte Murray contract, or if you need to secure a point guard, which I think is going to be a little harder to secure this offseason than finding a big in this market. You can't diminish what you already have. The Pelicans can't come back worse in the front court than they already were. And Kelly gave them some decent minutes. Like he's not a star. He shouldn't have been starting for the Pelicans, but that's the position he was forced into because of the team's overall lack of depth. So I think if you keep Kelly Olynyk, it's not a bad decision by the New Orleans Pelicans. He's not going to be a detriment to the team. It's just that his greatest value may be in his contract. If he helps the team win 3 games this year on the court, is that worth the potential in games that he could help them win by making a better deal down the road? You know, if Kelly brings back a first-round pick as part of a bigger deal, if Kelly brings back second-round picks that contribute to this team as part of a bigger deal, if Kelly can add, if removing him from the equation for the Pelicans can add value to this team ultimately, then that's why you have to consider moving Kelly Olynyk, and that's why you think that he's on the higher list of probable move candidates, because there are very few contracts that the Pelicans have outside of their core that they can move. They don't have a ton of attractive deals in order to secure high quality talent. So Kelly is that piece. So I get the argument for keeping him. And again, it wouldn't be a bad thing if the Pelicans do keep him. But I think it would be a problem to not look for ways to improve this team outside of what you already have. Like, you've got to go shopping and go find out what is available to you. And you've already got Kelly under contract, so you can afford to go shopping knowing that you already have something at home. I think that's the approach the Pelicans need to take with most of their players on this roster. You can't be a team with a whole bunch of so-called untradeable or untouchable players when you have lost as much as they have over the years. When the best you've been in the Western Conference is 8th in the past 6 years. If that's the place where you've been, and even with 49 wins, that's where you were. You were 8th. So everything success related is relative, right? So a team in that position, even if you think, hey, healthy, we can get back to that 49 win level. I wouldn't say that that's true based on what you have on this roster right now. Maybe you could. Maybe you shock the world and do that. But I would say ultimately, when you look at this team, there are not a lot of pieces that you go, this is champion. This is a rotation player in a championship team. Zion Williamson, yeah. Trey Murphy, yeah. Herb Jones, yeah. Outside of that, how many rotation players on the championship team do you see? I think CJ would be borderline. I think that's because of his contract. You know, he's making starter money, but he's at a stage in his career where I don't know if you want to play him starter minutes. So you have 3 guys who could make the rotation on a championship team. That's not good when there are teams that have 12 players who are playing in their rotation. Or you look at Indiana that's playing 10 players, going 10 players deep on a nightly basis in the NBA Finals. Pelicans can't do that. And it's funny that just a couple of years ago, we were talking about, well, I wasn't necessarily saying it, but the team was talking about it was the deepest team in the league. And here you go. Before we go, another quick piece of news that could impact the New Orleans Pelicans in one way or another. The Orlando Magic, after making that deal for Desmond Bane, have decided to release guards Gary Harris and Corey Joseph. They had team options on both of those players. I think either or both could be potential contenders, not both. They won't sign both, but either player could be a potential contender for a position in the New Orleans Pelicans backcourt. When you look at Gary Harris, you're talking about a guy who's an 11-year veteran, spent the last 4.5 seasons in Orlando, and is a guy who has career averages of 10 points, 2 assists, and 1 steal per game, shooting just under 37% from deep. A dependable combo guard who could fill a role for you to start the season while DeJounte Murray gets healthy. Unless you've taken somebody else or signed somebody who's better, Gary Harris could be a reasonable option. Same with Corey Joseph, 14 years of experience, played with San Antonio, Toronto, Indiana, Sacramento, Detroit, Golden State, and Orlando. A career 35% three-point shooter and a career 3-to-1 assist to turnover ratio. So you're looking for people who could take care of the basketball, run your offense, and allow you to still use Jose in beneficial positions. Jose Alvarado, and I'll say this time and time again, solid backup point guard, but should not be starting for the New Orleans Pelicans. It diminishes his ability to impact the game. Jose is best as a change of pace. Jose having to do what he does as a starter makes him less effective. That kind of energy that you need him to expend to be effective as a defender, to pressure 94 feet, to be the kind of player that he is in transition. When you want those things, that's when he's at his best, when you can change the pace of the game for him. But as a starter, when you're requiring certain things out of your point guard, it's not to say that Jose can't do them, but he just can't do them as well over the 30-plus minutes that you want to play a starter. Giving Jose the flexibility to be on ball, off the bench, and the ability to play off ball when Zion is handling the ball with the second unit makes him far more impactful. So I think you've got to look at finding somebody as a veteran to fill this spot. And I know folks are going to keep going back to Elfrid Payton, but I'm telling you, when the Pelicans are on the floor, Elfrid Payton's struggles really impact them. His inability to score and his inability to defend really hurt the Pelicans. So I think if you're going to find somebody, you need to get someone who's going to allow you to run your offense, but also can knock down some shots. You can't have enough shooters, and to play with Zion Williamson and Yves Missi, you've got two non-shooters on the floor. To put a third at your point guard spot leaves you at a real disadvantage, and he's not going to increase your tempo by creating enough steals in those types of situations to really allow you to play at the pace that you want. You're going to be taking the ball out of the basket because he's going to allow penetration, and he's going to allow players to get to the bucket and score easy points. So I think at least giving a look to a Gary Harris in particular, who has been a consistent double-figure scorer in this league, who is a guy who can knock down shots and is a guy who can run your offense. I think at least for the short term, if you can find him on a reasonable contract, I think he was getting paid maybe $7 million last year. If you can get him to a reasonable contract, I think he could be a contributor for the Pelicans. All right, folks, that's going to do it for today. Take it tomorrow off and be back on Thursday as we do each and every week. So make sure you check the rest of Boot Crew Media for all the shows that we have. Otherwise, and you know how to find me on social media at DM Grubb on Instagram, on Twitter, on you can find me on Blue Sky and TikTok as well. So make sure you hit the like button, the subscribe button, the share button, and the notification bell so you don't miss a single episode. I appreciate you all checking it out and tuning in and the support each and every day. Until the next time, y'all have a good one. This has been The Post Up with David Grubb.